All right, let's dive straight in. If you ever want to see how a life can end with barely a ripple, just watch the way New York swallows a funeral. No music, no flowers, not even a real goodbye. Just a handful of black umbrellas huddled under a sullen sky, while the rain slides off old gravestones and nobody dares to linger longer than manners require. That's how Mr. William Carter, once the head of a family, once somebody got sent off. And if you squinted past all the silence and the chill, you'd see her, Rose, standing in the back, thin hands folded, shoulders lost inside an old black coat, just trying to stay upright as her world crumbled. She didn't cry, she couldn't, not after all the tears she'd spent these last few years, sitting by his bedside watching the man fade away piece by piece. Across from her, Andrew, Carter-polished shoes, perfect coat, eyes cold enough to make the wind seem warm, didn't look at her, didn't say a word. His own father in the ground. But you'd think he was just checking off an unpleasant errand before heading back to whatever business called him to the city. After the last handful of earth hit the coffin, he didn't even pause, just turned and walked for the car, his shadow sharp and straight as a knife. Rose waited until the last person left before she knelt by the grave, touched the damp earth, and whispered her goodbye. That house on Park Avenue never felt more like a mausoleum than that afternoon, empty except for the ticking of clocks and the ghost of what used to be a family. Rose was in the kitchen out of habit, making tea like she had every day for years, though nobody was coming to drink it anymore. She heard Andrew behind her, voice flat as winter. No need for that anymore. She started to explain, but he cut her off. You don't need to do anything in this house now. Just like that, she was dismissed. 20 years of memories, and he wanted it all swept away by a cleaning crew. She went to her small room, the same room she'd called home for decades, and started packing what little she had. There was a scarf William had knitted for her one long ago Christmas, a photo album, and a suitcase more worn than the shoes on her feet. Andrew made a call from the living room, telling someone on the other end to clean out every inch like no one ever lived there. That stung. But Rose said nothing. When she left, Andrew didn't see her off, didn't say goodbye. He just tossed the house keys down to the stone steps with a clatter. Keep them. This isn't a nursing home. Rose set the keys on the windowsill and left without looking back. That night, Andrew met his old friend Emily at a bar, telling her he'd finally kicked Rose out for good. Emily, always sharper than she let on, pushed back. She took care of your father for years. Andrew only shrugged. She was paid. She did her job. Don't make her into some angel. But there was more to it than that, and Emily could see it. Are you sure you're not blaming the wrong person? She said, but he wouldn't hear it. Meanwhile, Rose landed in a dingy boarding house in Jackson Heights, greeted by Martha, the landlady, who offered her soup and a kind word. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd gotten from the Carters. The rain kept coming, and Rose stared out at the city, thinking of the man she'd lost and the boy who'd grown up to hate her for reasons she could never fix. Andrew tried to bury it all with bourbon and anger. He went through his father's things, found old letters, a scarf, a pocket watch, and tossed them aside in disgust, still blaming Rose for every crack in his family. The memories twisted in his mind. His mother's rage, Rose's silent suffering, the night as a child when he'd been ripped from her arms by a mother jealous and broken. He'd spent years thinking of Rose not as a person, but as that woman, someone to blame for everything lost. One day, rooting through Rose's old room, Andrew found a yellowed photograph of his parents and Rose, young and smiling, arms linked on a beach, the word friends forever scribbled on the back. The image didn't fit the story he'd been told. It made him angry, then confused, then just tired. He found a letter from his father, thank you for staying, when no one else did, crumpled it, furious at this quiet loyalty he'd never understood. Then another photo, all three, before life pulled them apart. He called Emily, desperate for someone to make sense of it. Emily listened, then said what nobody else had, maybe it didn't happen the way you think. But Andrew wouldn't let go of the bitterness. My mother said she was betrayed. Emily only shook her head. Sometimes adults just hurt. That's all. When Andrew tried to confront Rose with the photos, she offered only silence and a letter to deliver. If there's any humanity left, You'll give this to the person who needs it. But by the time Andrew realized what that meant, Rose was gone. Martha told him she left nothing but a clean room and a wild daisy on the table. No forwarding address. Only a note, "I forgive you. I always wished for your happiness." Andrew read it again and again, sitting on the steps of her old boarding house, a grown man lost in regret. Driven by that note, Andrew went looking for his mother. He found Susan Carter living in a glossy apartment in Williamsburg, surrounded by the remnants of her old glamour. She poured herself a drink and told him the truth. "I left because I knew I could never win him back. He loved her in a way he never loved me. I blamed her because it was easier than blaming myself." Andrew, shaking, asked if she ever regretted it. "No, I chose to survive. Rose chose to stay. You chose to hate." The conversation didn't heal anything. It just left Andrew raw, aching, and finally honest enough to realize how badly he'd misjudged everything. When he got back to New York, Andrew tore through the old mansion, looking for any trace of Rose, but found only empty rooms and echoes of his own anger. Emily came by, urging him to stop punishing himself. "Start by helping people like her," she said, handing him a folder of names elderly housekeepers with nowhere to go. Then, finally, a break, Emily called to say a social worker had found Rose in a nursing home outside Albany. Andrew rushed there, heart pounding, to find Rose, frilier than before, eyes on the garden, not speaking. He knelt by her bed, whispered his apologies, held her hand as tears finally came. She didn't say much, but her fingers curled weakly around his. Forgiveness, silent but complete. He brought Rose back to the mansion, not as a maid, but as family. For the first time, the old house filled with life. Emily visiting, Rose reading by the window, laughter returning. Andrew honored her by starting a fund to help women like her, the Eternal Rose Fund, which soon drew attention from press and public alike. At the launch, Andrew stood before a crowd and told the story as plain as he could, how he'd failed, how he'd learned, how forgiveness was the only way forward. Years slipped by, and in the light of a new spring, Andrew cared for Rose as she once cared for him. He held her hand, called her mother, let her know that her quiet love had finally been seen. She lived long enough to see herself honored, not just by one man, but by a city, and when the day came to say goodbye, she left knowing that her story had become so much more than one of loss. And you know what? That's the kind of ending that leaves you unsettled, because what if forgiveness had come too late? What if pride had won? Now, it's your turn. Do you think Andrew was right to seek forgiveness? Or was it too little, too late? Does community matter more than blood? Or do old wounds never truly heal? Let us know your thoughts, because stories like this don't end in the telling, they end in the living.